Guten Tag, mein Freundin, das ist Herr Director. Now, anyways, ever heard so many people try to overly romanticize the good old days, or others try to make the old days sound like it was nothing but gloom and doom? A lot of that is somewhere within the middle. Because after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Franks ended up uniting so many of the other Germanic tribes and spanning up a kingdom, or rather empire, that went from the Pyrenees all the way to Swabia, here in Germany. And then began an era of learning and knowledge and economic prosperity called the Carolingian Renaissance. So, then it seemed like a bed of roses after that, right? Well, for a while. But then, as most people were still illiterate, then the Frankish kingdom divided after the death of Charlemagne. And because of that, well, they were at each other's throats, the sons of Charlemagne. The East Franks, along with the Alemanni and the Saxons, took the German part of the kingdom. Well, the Franks ended up taking the Frankenreich, Frankish realm, or Francia, France. Then came my other ancestors, who were not kind to my Germanic and Anglo ancestors, the Vikings, who ended up bringing an end to the Carolingian Renaissance and then swamping the area with refugees from villages and cities, from areas they plundered, none more so than the infamous or famous Ragnar Lothbrok, fearsome warrior. So, as well as many of the Viking warlords causing trouble and raiding villages, oftentimes the disunited lords and knights of Europe would attack each other too. And there were also the Muslim invasion coming in from the south by the Arabs and Moors, having captured the peninsula of Iberia and establishing their own realm of Al-Andalus. Simultaneously, a massive horde of Finno-Ugric horsemen, known as the Magyars, came trampling in from the east. So then they eventually developed small forts, mottes and baileys. And they worked for quite a while. From which then they had a system where the people would pay taxes via their labor and then work 3 days on the fields for themselves. And in times of trouble, they would be the ones to fight for their lord or knight, while the lords were to fight for their king. But sadly, many of these people were not united under one national identity yet. Plus, even if you look at medieval Germany, there were several kingdoms. Even look at England before 1066. They had the 7 kingdoms. No, not those 7 kingdoms. The Anglo-Saxon 7 kingdoms. Sorry about that. But the 7 kingdoms in Game of Thrones were inspired off of the Anglo-Saxon 7 kingdoms. Eventually, of course, warfare quickly got more elaborate. And then these wooden forts, the motte and bailey, wouldn't hold very well. So then they turned to turning the centerpiece, the keep, into stone, and then later on the outer walls into stone. And that's when we got stone fortresses, much like this one, Hohen Urach, just outside the town of Urach. Now, a lot of these were not built overnight, of course, that's obvious. A lot of these stone castles took 10 to 20 years to construct, or even longer, as they were soon expanded, remodeled, reshaped. For example, this round wall, along with the round towers, were constructed in the later Middle Ages as per the change in defense. And here we have the first entrance, but then as you noticed, there's another gateway after the first gateway, as this, I believe, used to be the old gatehouse, providing another strategic form of defense in case they were to breach the first gateway. They would be charging right into a mass of arrows. It looks like they've been doing some restoration. As you can see, the lightly colored stones, I think those are some new stones laid down upon the old ones. Well, it's because no material lasts forever, so enjoy it while you can. As you can see here, then there's the outer wall, just connecting to the gatehouse, an inner wall, and then the keep. You can see that that was more of a stylish place by the architecture of the windows. At least I hope you can see this. For the Lord and Lady, the Counts of Urach, the first original inhabitants. But I'm not sure if those windows were designed during the reign of the House of Urach. Here overlooking the town of Urach, this castle provides a strategic place of overlooking the town in this small valley, where the peasants could then run up here and get the supplies they needed. And as the roads were then made out of dirt, any army moving forward would be creating a dirt cloud as for them to thus blow the horn and warn the peasants of any enemy armies incoming. In the early Middle Ages. And given the window here, this provides perfect strategic advantages, because when you're on the defensive, you have to make sure you make it as difficult for the enemy as possible to take your fortifications, which is why the windows slant inwards as they're going outward to give an advantage for the archers defending this place. Now, around the time that the wooden castles were being abandoned, in 1025, the Count of Urach ended up commissioning and paying for the construction of this original castle in 1025. Around the turn of the millennium, when stone castles were beginning to replace wooden ones. In 1235, that's when the first original records were being kept of this mighty fortress. Originally, it probably didn't seem like it was of great importance, but as literacy eventually spread from the monks to the nobles, then down to the growing middle class, those who could read had to be able to read in order to understand the history of this place. However, this was not always owned by the Counts of Urach, as in 1264, this was bought by the Count of Württemberg, hence why this castle is part of the German state of Baden-Württemberg to this very day. However, this, I believe, was the original outer wall. As I said earlier, there was great expansion. In 1428, that's when this castle was then expanded into a fortress. Though, like I said, there were always factions vying for power and control, as there was no unified national identity yet. And in 1519, this place was captured by an organization called the Swabian Alliance, confiscated during the conflict with Count Urach of Württemberg. And in 1534 to 1536, this was converted from a more homely castle into a prison fortress, and was used as a prison fortress for the rest of its time in history. Here, I believe, was the inner keep. Now, eventually, warfare became so deadly and complicated and even dangerous that the old stone structures such as this one were eventually becoming irrelevant, because as the discovery of gunpowder reached Europe, they then found the way to catapult stone balls via the use of gunpowder, which was more effective and deadly and dangerous. And this became evident for how dangerous the use of gunpowder was and how effective it was against stone castles in the 30 Years' War. And in 1635, this castle had been overrun by the imperial Catholic troops of the Holy Roman Emperor from the Habsburg League. Originally started out as a church war between Protestant Christians and Catholic Christians, but eventually Catholic Christians joined in with the Protestant Christians because they saw the Habsburg dynasty as a much greater threat. Hence the French involvement within the 30 Years' War. Such a conflict so bad. No one would see a deadlier conflict after that until the 7 Years' War. And out there was the original chapel, built in 1662, though you can't see it now. Much of it has probably been carried away or overgrown. But here you can still get a glimpse of almost the castle's former glory. Now, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe that this is where the armory would have been. As you can see, in order to maintain a good water supply during siege, they of course needed to have a well. Over here was the original kitchen. Places where they needed to cook. And preparing a meal for the castle guests or themselves during times of peace. Oh wow, looks like some people still do some cooking here every now and then. Now to close things off, the original Great Hall. As you can see, you can still get a glimpse of almost its full glory here, while overlooking the city. Here's where the knights and the counts and lords would do their feasting. And out here you can catch some of the outer defenses, or rather inner defenses. In fact, I found out that the original gateway would have been right there. And the first outer gate would have been around there. Another inner gate, then a third gatehouse, providing a heavily strategic fortified place in the time of the Middle Ages. But then as the modern warfare began to emerge with the gunpowder weapons, this place had all but become irrelevant. And so eventually, Count Eugene of Württemberg did not see any more purpose in having this kept up. So I believe it was in 1735 that he had so much of this place demolished. At least some part of it is still left up for us to enjoy. Okay, actually it was 1765 that this place had been partially demolished. The history and the former glory, almost like taking a look back in time as for us to prepare for the future. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps out the channel when you do that. Dankeschön. direkt aus